R.C. Davis. I'm a local writer-author. Got a short bit of prose for you tonight, so let's try to stay awake until the end. Oh, and also I've got braces, so if I lisp, just ignore me. Snow falling on dead leaves. The week-old snow crunched underfoot, and it made his steps loud in the quiet forest. It was really cold out. Passing a faded sundrop thermometer tacked to the garden shed, it read 15 degrees. There was no wind to steal away the warmth that had built up inside his heavy coat, though, so as long as he kept moving, he felt comfortable. He ambled along, engrossed in what was going on inside his head. The little 20-gauge double-barrel shotgun was starting to grow heavy in his hands, so he switched his hold. Shifting it up underneath his right arm, he supported it in the crook of his elbow. He hadn't given much thought as to why he had brought it. He was just pseudo-hunting. Anyone passing would presume he was out for pheasant, quail, or rabbit, but it was just for show. No one would think he was weird for wanting to shoot unsuspecting little animals. However, to be out for a walk in the woods with a snowstorm threatening might seem a little nuts. He wouldn't blame them for believing it. Sometimes he felt like he was. Did 14-year-old boys really go crazy? Were the odds in his favor that he could be driven crazy by an uncaring mother? He could believe it. That's what had driven him out this day. She could have picked a warmer day to have her crying fits, but no, she chose a cold, cloudy January afternoon. He missed the summer when he could escape to his favorite spot above the roller dam. There was no limit as to how long he could linger there in the warm weather. He would just grab his rod and disappear out the back door. He loved to sit and cast corn-laden hooks into turbulent water at the base, anticipating a battle with the mammoth carp that lay there in wait. He felt so carefree when he didn't have to worry about being driven back inside by the cold. As he worked his way through a thicket of small saplings, he recalled the moment he had returned from his part-time job downtown at the lawnmower shop. He had started early this morning, working on a bevy of snowblowers, and when he wasn't needed there anymore, they sent him away. He walked in the front door and going to his room, had to pass through hers. He didn't see her at first, sitting on the edge of her bed, weeping. When he did say hello, she stood up and covered her eyes with her hands, knocking off the twice-repaired eyeglasses that had been perched there. She didn't bother to pick them up, but instead walked to the curtainless window and turned her back to him. Now she started to wail, starting out low at crescendoed, and then she started wringing her hands. He decided right then that he'd had enough. Something inside him just snapped, and that's exactly how it felt, like a wishbone from a Thanksgiving turkey being broken over the holiday table. He remembered the anger rising up in him, and stomping to the closet, he pulled out the little shotgun. He broke it open to check to see if it was loaded, and seeing it was not, he pulled a box of shells off the top shelf. Opening the top flap, he counted them out, 22 in all. Realizing that she had stopped her wailing, he looked up at her. She was now just standing there, doe-eyed, her salt and pepper hair in wild disarray. He saw her gulp, so he put the gun down on the table. Taking his winter coat off the hook, he put it on. He then dumped the contents of the shell box into one of the large pockets. Removing his gloves and stocking cap from the other, he pulled them on. Then picking up the gun, he moved toward the door. And he stopped just long enough to yell at her, "Just so you know, I've had enough of your crap." When she realized that he wasn't going to shoot her, she started in wailing and crying again. So he was sure to slam the back door really hard to make his point. As he did, a portrait of him and her together at a happier time leapt from the wall, crashing onto the floor, small pieces of glass had scattered in all directions. He now made his way deeper into the woods. The trees went from being a variety of maple, elm, and ash to mostly oak. Oaks were known for holding on to their foliage for as long as they could, the dead brown leaves hanging on until the new ones pushed them out, stubborn until the end, just like him. He moved down into a small glen. The slate-gray clouds stuck over his head. His toes were starting to grow numb, so he stomped as he walked in vain attempt to help the blood circulate better. This disturbed a cottontail rabbit, causing it to burst out from under a low bush. He pulled up the shotgun and pressed its butt tight against his shoulder. Then leaning his cheek against the stock, he sighted along the barrels. The rabbit zigzagged as it moved away, yet he didn't pull the trigger. It didn't matter, though. He hadn't even bothered to load it. Lowering it back down, he noticed the walnut stalk was now wet. He was crying. He wondered to himself how long he'd been doing that. When he had pushed the wood against his cheek to target his prey, the tears had flown into the cross-hatched engravings decorating its surface. Freezing there, it made an odd-looking pattern. He tried to convince himself that it was the cold that had made his eyes water, but he knew better. He didn't cry much, and he sure didn't want anybody else to see him doing it. Words like pansy and crybaby would be thrown at him, and he knew that the old sticks and stones adage was a lie. Names always hurt. Wiping his face with a rough wool glove, he tried to stem the flow of water from his eyes, hoping to remove all trace of his frailty. However, it didn't help. He lost all control then and broke down sobbing. He stood there with his head hanging down, dripping hot tears. He watched them make interesting little holes in the virgin snow on the ground in front of him. It's not her fault. What? He said, looking up, but there was no one else around. That was when he saw the large owl perched up in one of the oaks no more than 20 feet away, its large yellow eyes questioning. Could it have been? Nah, he said out loud, and at that the bird let out a noise that only owls could make and silently flapped away. He watched it go, gliding effortlessly through the tree trunks. He realized then that they were his words and his voice inside his own head. Deep down inside, he knew she couldn't help it, and that her bastard of a husband had walked out on her and left her with nothing, stealing away in the night when they had been fast asleep. What had really cinched it for him, though, was that his two sisters had been lured away as well. This had broken his heart. At first, he had a difficult time forgiving their traitorous behavior, but over time he came to accept that they couldn't help it either. They had been fooled into believing life would be better. Moving out of the little valley, he walked for a ways between massive trunks before coming to a cut bank on the river shore. The flowing dark water, still free from ice, reflected his fragmented image. He stood watching it ripple past, lost in thought. His anger then dissolved away completely, and pity took its place. He knew she was struggling to keep her sanity, and he wondered then if she understood that he was too. Now the snow came, not gradually, but all at once. Like someone had dumped it from a large box in the clouds. The flakes as large as cotton balls, falling straight down. They came so thick it made seeing difficult. He stepped back underneath the trees and listened. It literally clattered as it struck the dead leaves in the trees. It was only sound in the timber, and it seemed to echo. A steady staccato vacillating throughout the treetops. After a few minutes it slowed, and he found the steady beat in the trees comforting, like the lullaby of a slow summer rain on the roof on a sleepless night. He felt the cold inside his coat now, and his stomach rumbled from hunger. The thought of hot cocoa and chocolate chip cookies made him turn around and start walking back the way he had come. As he stumbled over the brush and branches, he saw a solution to their dilemma. He would make it right with her. He had doubts that things would improve much, but regardless, he was going to try. He knew that this would at least make him feel better about himself. There was always hope. He worked his way back through the ancient trees, his footprints fast filling with snow. The little cottontail, sitting undetected under a deadfall, watched as he disappeared into the storm. The noise of his footfall went with him, leaving only the sound of snow falling on dead leaves.